Hi, my name is Yang. I want to zero in on the question of incentives in the party and the performance of democracy. The GOP today looks less like a political party than a collection of hundreds of political entrepreneurs, many treating the offices as platforms for individual brand building rather than places to work with other politicians to pass laws. To add insult to injury, Republicans have known from the beginning that they would all be better off with Trump gone, but also that anyone who tried to make that happen would risk the anger of his voters. So my question is, instead of staying quiet on the sidelines in hopes of that fate would intervene, how to overcome collective action problem in the more divided GOP? What institutional reforms that can be made to change the incentives in the party system that in turn improves the performance of democracy?
So, I mean, this is true of both parties. I'm going to give a bipartisan answer here. For your average member of Congress, if you're a sitting Republican, you're more concerned in a Republican district in, say, Texas, you're more concerned about a challenge from your right than a challenge from the opposing party. So if I'm a Republican in a Republican district in Texas, I not only have to be Republican, I got to be far right Republican, or I got to make sure I'm pandering to that base. And if I'm a Democrat in a Democratic leaning district, I have to be concerned about a challenge from the far left. So as I said in my remarks, ideological purity is survival. And in that environment, there's no political incentive for compromise. So you end up in a situation where on the Republican side, everybody's afraid of Trump. No one wants to be seen as less than pure. No one wants to be seen as moderate, as willing to work with the other side. And that's how you end up in a situation where nothing gets done. And we're polarized, and even, a common sense solution to what some would believe is the number one problem in America, immigration, is cast off because nobody wants to exercise the political courage to vote for it. They'd rather have the issue. I'd rather be in a position where I call the guy in the other party weak or evil or whatever than to actually work with him to come up with a solution where I get something and he gets something and the people's problem is solved.
Well, I'm a Republican. I don't know what the hell that means, but your description of the Republican Party today is pretty close to reality, I think. I mean, I've said what the Republican Party is today, in my opinion, is a tribe. It's an amalgamation of different tribes. And the only way that's going to change, and it will change, is the only way it's going to change soon, and I believe it will change soon, is if Trump loses this election, because we have very little courage today in politics. And I would say not just Republicans, but Democrats, that too many politicians define themselves or see themselves by their title. Well, I'm a United States Senator or I'm a congressman, so I can't jeopardize that. That's who I am. Now, you're a lot more than a senator or a congressman or a former secretary. You're Jeh Johnson, Bob Pape, you're who you are. I mean, just incidentally, you're something else. But don't take that approach to elective office, because you'll be a failure. And at some point in your life, you'll review that and you won't be happy with yourself. Mm-hmm. And until we find some new courage, in both parties, but you ask about the Republican Party, because Trump's, in my opinion, he's so kowtowed everybody, and they're so afraid of him. But if he loses in November, and I think he will, I mean, we've got a lot of, it's going to happen in the next 6 months. But you look at what's happened. If he loses in November, what's happened in the Republican Party, that would mean that the Republican Party has lost the last 4 elections. They lost it 2018, 2020, 2022, then 2024. It will implode. Whatever the Republican Party is today, it will implode, and it will dissolve very quickly. And you will find new leaders emerge very quickly. Not MAGA, not Trump, because they've been losers. They've taken the Republican Party down a real disastrous path. And they're going to have to build back, or they may become inconsequential, because it will fragment. And I mean, the Democratic Party has some of that as well. I mean, if Biden's elected, I mean, he's going to be 82 years old. I mean, so you've got a party led by an 82-year-old. But as I tell people, I mean, elections are about choices. This is your choice, Biden or Trump, and you decide. But both parties are going to have consequences in the future, regardless of who wins this election.
Right here.
There's a lot of talk about democracy, and rightly so. The one word that's always missing from the national conversations is republic. We are a democratic republic, which means some people know better than some other people some of the time about some things, which is antithetical to the lack of respect for authority, which I feel 2 steps back underscores so much of what we're talking about systemically. But republic is a subject that deserves a lot more attention from those of you who are bringing attention to these intractable problems. Thank you.
Could you spell that out a little bit more, please?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Yep.
Some people know better than some other people some of the time, and the founders very firmly understood that the tyranny of the masses is something that needs to be protected against. The Electoral College, and my neighbor took my follow-up question right out of my mouth, which was going to be to ask you directly, are you in favor of the abolition of the Electoral College?
I'm
Yes.
not. He is. I'm
Yeah.
not.
Yes, but it's not going to happen.
2 to 1.
It's not going to happen. I would do away with it tomorrow if I could. Let me address the first part of your statement. I used to be a jury trial lawyer. I tried a case to a jury in January. That was the last jury case I would try. I'm 66. I'm too old for this stuff. But I used to try a lot of jury cases. Collectively, 12 jurors have a perfect recollection of events. And collectively, 12 people off the street, randomly selected for a jury, are pretty smart and pretty wise, with a lot of common sense. And so I wouldn't count out the masses. It's just that our leaders, our elected leaders, are not acting in accordance with the will of the masses. That's how I see it. They're acting in accordance with the loudest voices in the masses. And so I do believe in the principle of democracy. I mean, are there people more capable of, one question I always ask elected members of Congress is it your role to simply vote in accordance with the will of your constituents, or is it your role to lead and to lead them to a better, more informed place and explain your vote to them and why it's good for them, even though they don't fully understand it? And it's probably a little bit of both.
I'll give you a quote that I think addresses this by Edmund Burke, who many of you know who he was, a great conservative leader in Great Britain, 19th century. And he once said, and I think this defines it, your representative owes you not only his industry, but his judgment as well. And he betrays rather than serves you if he sacrifices it to your opinion. Now that may seem a little arrogant, but when you vote for somebody, you vote for that person partly, maybe mainly, because you trust their judgment. You're not going to agree with them on every vote. I mean, in 12 years in the Senate, it never happened to me that somebody agreed with me on every vote I cast, thousands. But I think Burke had it pretty accurate. And I don't think people think about it, get that cerebral when they vote. But this is why we talked today about where I think a lot of the problems with the Republican Party started is this absolutism. We're absolutely right all the time. You're absolutely wrong all the time. I mean, you'd start with the Newt Gingrich in 1994 contract with America, then Grover Norquist signed this, no new taxes, and then we got to the Tea Party and so on and so on. So you didn't respect another person's opinion. You didn't have anything to do with the Democratic Party. You're all idiots because we're the only ones smart enough to know anything. And the only alternative to that is back where we started, authoritarian government. Because democracy, republic, can only survive with compromise.